hat is a little big for this camera, but like I'm just gonna go with it. Hey guys, it's Ashley, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about some of my recent reads that I recently read, and also some of the books that I'm going to be excited to get into in the future. So without further ado, let's get started. So in the beginning of the year, I went on this kind of exploration into the Six of Crows and Leigh Bardugo Grisha world. So I read the Grisha trilogy and the Six of Crows duology, but then after that I kind of took a little spin off and like started branching off into other things. And the first thing that I branched off of after I read the Six of Crows duology was Ghosts of the Shadow Market by Cassandra Clare, and probably some other people, but I don't remember who. I read this on ebook, which is why I don't have the physical copy here and you're looking at a picture that I got from Google, but that doesn't matter because either way it was really, really good. Okay, I had heard that you could go into Queen of Air and Darkness without having read this and it would be totally fine, but I'd also heard that reading Queen of Air and Darkness and then going into this would spoil something huge that happens in this anthology. So I decided to go ahead and jump into the anthology first, knowing that either way I would be safe and it would be fine. I wasn't expecting to love this as much as I did, especially because I didn't know going into it that it was following Gem. But this book was so good. Some of the stories actually had me crying, which I was not expecting. There was one scene in these stories with Will and Gem, and I'm not going to tell you much more other than that that scene made me really, really cry. And if you know what I'm talking about, good for you. I don't want to spoil anybody, but it just like, I broke down. We learn more about Matthew Lightwood, who we're going to be seeing in the Last Hours trilogy. We learn more about Raphael. We learn more about Jace and where he came from. We learned more about, what else? Oh, Celine. Celine, I don't remember her last name, but she's French. We learned a lot more about her. Oh, and we learned a lot about Kit. And that's all I'm gonna say because the big spoiler has to do with Kit going into Queen of Air and Darkness. And I just want to say to those of you who have like read this anthology and who know what I'm talking about, I was blown away by that. I was so surprised and so shocked at what's gonna happen in Queen of Air and Darkness. Oh my god, that's all I'm going to say. We're gonna move on now before I end up spoiling somebody on accident. So after Ghosts of the Shadow Market, I ended up hopping into King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. Wow, that's a shiny cover. Oh wow. Mostly because it wasn't out yet at the time that I finished Crooked Kingdom, so I hopped into Cassandra Clare and then I hopped back into Leigh Bardugo, so here we are. For those of you who don't know, King of Scars follows Nikolai after the events of Six of Crows and after the events of the Grisha trilogy. I'm not gonna say anything more because I don't want to spoil things that happen in those two series, but I wasn't a huge fan of this book, to be completely honest with you. A lot of the time I just felt like I was cruising through it, not really understanding what was happening and just kind of going along with it anyway because I wanted to know what was gonna happen. And by the end, I still didn't really get what had happened, so I don't really know how to feel. I think I gave it 4 stars, maybe 4.5, but if I had given it 4.5 now, I'm changing it to a 4 as I'm talking because it really didn't have any impact on me whatsoever, this book. I would be eager to see where she's taking this from here because the end definitely left off on a like, whoa cliffhanger. So I'm eager to see where it goes, but I wasn't like the biggest fan of this story in particular. There was just a lot happening that I was super confused about, and I was just kind of going along with anyway because I didn't want to have to dive in and understand it any more than I did. I guess it's one of those books that I wasn't willing to put in the work to know more about, so it didn't have the biggest impact on me. Which I guess in a way is my fault, but if it wasn't interesting enough for me to put in the work, is that really my fault? Not blaming Leigh Bardugo for anything. I'm just saying. And then the next book I stumbled into was one that I had been putting off for some unknown reason since November of last year, and that was Archenemies by Marissa Meyer. If you know, from like 2 years ago, I made a review for Renegades and I read Renegades for the first time and I absolutely loved it. And so when this book came out, I had wanted to read it immediately and then I never did. So I took this chance now to get my hands on it, to read it, and it was absolutely incredible. Everything that I would have wanted. 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5 stars, however you want to rate it. It was perfect. I do have a reading vlog slash spoiler unspoiler review up, so I'll leave that link down below if you want to learn more. But basically it's this world where there are these supervillains and superheroes, and there's a lot of power dynamic between the two. There's a lot of discussion about power and what happens when one soul group holds all of the power. And it's just really, really interesting with a really fun story and really fun characters. So I highly recommend, if you haven't picked this up yet, to get your hands on the first book, Renegades, because it's so, so good. And then I picked up a book that I really haven't talked a whole lot about in this channel, but I mentioned it in my spring anticipated releases video, and that is the Steel Prince comic by V.E. Schwab. So this comic is volume 1, which means it contains the first 4 issues of the comic. There's going to be 4 different volumes, I believe, that is going to have 16 issues in all. 4 times 4 is 16. That makes sense, Ashley. And this comic series, if you don't know, follows Rai's father from A Darker Shade of Magic, his father when he was younger. So it kind of goes into detail about the things that he did as a youngin', and all of the trouble that he got into himself. Something that I didn't know going into this was that we actually were hinted at this in A Conjuring of Light, and V.E. Schwab makes sure to let us know what we forgot. Because in the very, very beginning, she has this little, like, snippet here. One is like a little snippet from A Conjuring of Light, and the other one was a little snippet of what she said about Maxim. This is from A Conjuring of Light. I don't remember this at all, but it's from the book. She said it herself. "The Steel Prince," said Solinaire, and then reading Maxim's expression, "It surprises you that the tales of your exploits reach beyond your own borders?" The Pharaoh's fingers grazed the edge of the map. "The Steel Prince, who tore the heart from the rebel army. The Steel Prince, who survived the Night of Knives. The Steel Prince, who slayed the Pirate Queen." Maxim finished his drink and set the glass aside. "I suppose we never know the scale of our life stories, which parts will survive and which will die with us." So apparently that is the snippet that she said that she slipped into the book to give leeway to a story all about Maxim's adventures when he was young. And this is what we get, and it was beautiful. This makes me want to reread the series immediately so that I know more about him and that I remember everything that happened, because I don't remember anything. The artwork in this book is really, really pretty. There's really beautiful colors, and at the very, very end, they go into kind of like breakdowns as to how they decided to make all of the different panels and all of the different scenes come to life. Highly recommend, and I cannot wait for the next one. This comic is supposed to bridge the gap between A Darker Shade of Magic and the Threads of Power trilogy that is coming out next. And the last 2 books that I read most recently were by the same author, and I read pretty much back to back immediately, and I read on ebook. So they've all got those things in common. The first of which is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have heard so much hype for this book since it came out last year. So much hype. I feel like everybody who read this book, it ended up being their favorite book of the year. It was crazy how much hype I've heard for this book. And I have to say, I was a little skeptical going into it. The premise sounds really, really, really good, but when something has that much hype, you just question everything you knew about a book. And I'm here to tell you that I was blown away, and this lived up to its hype tenfold. Like, it was incredible. If you haven't heard of this story or don't know much about it, we follow this woman named Evelyn Hugo who is in her 80s, and she was a big movie star celebrity back in her heyday. She was like a Marilyn Monroe mixed with a Meryl Streep. That's literally how I imagine Evelyn Hugo. And so she's 80 years old now, and the one thing that everybody's known about her is that she is notorious for having had 7 husbands. But nobody knows really the backstory behind them. Nobody knows why or how or what happened, and how she managed to outlive them all. The person that we follow in this story, though, is not Evelyn Hugo. It is a reporter for a magazine whose name is Monique. She one day gets this invitation from Evelyn Hugo to write a piece on the gown auction that she's doing, as in she's auctioning off a lot of her gowns for breast cancer, the Breast Cancer Foundation. And so Monique goes into this interview thinking, like, what the hell am I doing? Like, what is happening? Only to find out that this interview is nothing as what she thinks, because Evelyn Hugo wants her to write her biography when she dies. So Evelyn Hugo is going to confide in this woman and just spill all of the details and all of the tea when it comes to her life. Now you're probably thinking, why would she choose this girl? That is revealed at the end of the book, and that is a part of why this book was so good to me. The entire time I was trying to guess, what is it about Monique that Evelyn really liked? But you know that there's something else to it. You know there's something else to the story, and it just makes you want to keep reading. Plus, Evelyn keeps hinting at this, like, you know, impending, oh, you're not gonna like me by the end of this, like, stop thinking that I'm all that, like, you're really not gonna like me. And so you're just constantly thinking, what the hell did Evelyn do? By the end, you get all of your answers, and it's such a good book. It's so good. And I highly recommend, if you're interested, if this sounds at all interesting to you, just definitely give it a try, because I 100% can recommend. It's good. And then the final book that I most recently read was her next book that everybody has been raving about, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This story, if you don't know, based on all of the people that have been talking about it recently, is about a 1970s rock band and the reasons behind why they broke up. It covers everything leading up to who they were before they got together. We follow Daisy Jones, who is a solo artist just wanting to make it big, and we follow the Six, who is a band comprised of 6 people who is on their way to making it big. And so these two kind of individual entities collide and come together, and they form this amazing band with this amazing album that goes crazy popular, and then all of a sudden break up and nobody knows why. So this book is kind of covering the reasons behind that and what the hell happened. Now, people have been giving this book extremely rave reviews. I know that different booktubers everywhere have been talking about how good it is and how, you know, amazing, and how many times they read it right afterward and how many times they cried and all of this stuff. I don't know if I'm missing something, but it just didn't like resonate with me as much as The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo did. I wasn't so drawn into it that I was unable to like stop reading, that I needed to reread it, that I was crying. Like, I wasn't doing any of that. Granted, I did after finished reading it go immediately onto Spotify to try to find these songs so I could listen to them, and then realized that the band wasn't real. So that's gotta say something for her writing. No, I'm not saying all of these things because I didn't enjoy the book. I absolutely loved the book. It just didn't resonate with me as well as it did with other people, and that's totally fine. I still enjoyed the story, and I loved the characters, and it was just such a good book. But I didn't have that emotional response that other people did, which is totally fine. It was a 4-star read for me, and I will definitely be reading it again at some point. Just don't know when. I feel like one of the things that I love about Taylor Jenkins Reid's books is that she ties like history so well into her stories. Like, both The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six were set relatively within the same time frame. Evelyn Hugo was about 1950s. Most of this took place 1950s, 60s, and Daisy Jones and the Six starts in the 50s, 60s, but ends up having most of it take place in the 70s. And so there was a lot of mainstream media that Taylor Jenkins Reid was able to tie into both of these stories in the time periods that they were in, which makes you really feel immersed in that time period. So I definitely recommend her stories if you're looking for that kind of like 1950s to 70s, like Californian, US, you know, America feel. One is about a movie star, one is about a rock band. They're two totally different things, but they're both so phenomenal. So I highly recommend if you're interested. I really loved them, and I'm gonna stop talking about them now. Now we've come to the point in the video where I'm going to share some of the books that I'm currently reading right now. I'm getting really hot, right? Like, I'm sweating right now, and I don't know why. So I'm going to not share some of the books that I'm gonna be reading with you soon. Let's just talk about what I'm currently reading right now. So I'm in the middle of 2 books right now. One I've kind of sort of DNF'd at this point, but I'm probably gonna go back to. It's just kind of like on pause at this point. And that's A Sky Full of Stars by Jessica Brody and Joanne Rendell. I didn't mean to say DNF. I didn't DNF it. I have it on pause, like I said. So when I was explaining this book in my spring anticipated releases video, I kind of missed the one word that like would have had people really interested, I think, and that's Les Mis. This is like a Les Mis French Revolution retelling set in space, and it's really, really good. The only thing that I have with it, and the reason that I have it on pause right now, is because I'm more than halfway through it, and the 3 characters that we follow have not yet come together in any way whatsoever. The one character, Chatine and Marcellus, they'll do something together and then go their separate ways. And then we'll have Marcellus and Alouette come together to do something and go their separate ways. And then Marcellus and Chantine will come together and go their separate ways. So everybody is kind of still separate and like working together in periods of time, and I really just want them to like all come together, and I'm just a little impatient in this big book to be waiting for that. So I put it on pause for now, and I went to read another book, and we'll hopefully come back to this at some time soon, but it's really, really good so far. I didn't have the patience to keep waiting for the characters to come together. And then the book that I'm currently in the middle of, as in like actively reading still, are The Red Scrolls of Magic by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu, which is the Magnus and Alec book that is set sometime in the middle of the Mortal Instruments or at the end of the Mortal Instruments. I can't remember, but that's like the time period that we're in right now. So like the stuff that's recently happened has not yet happened, but the stuff that did happen in the Mortal Instruments has happened. But what I can say is that this story is so good so far. Magnus and Alec are so cute, and I want more Malik story. This book premise basically follows Magnus and Alec as they're on their vacation in Paris and they're trying to get to know each other, and then all of a sudden Tessa comes along and is like, you need to disband this cult, and Magnus is like, why do I need to do it? And Tessa's like, because we think you made it. And Magnus is like, what the fuck are you talking about? So the whole story is Magnus and Alec basically trying to figure out why Magnus can't remember starting a cult. That's about as far as I am right now in this book. I'm only on page 61 right now, so I'm not even that far into it, but it's so good, it's so cute. The Magnus and Alec scenes, like when they're together, are like just so heartwarming, and I can't wait to keep reading this. So guys, those are the books that I'm currently reading and also the books that I have read in the past few weeks. Let me know a recent read of yours that you absolutely loved. Let me know if it was a reread, if it was a new read, if it was a new release, an old release. I really love all of these books, and I've loved all of these books. I'm really looking forward to starting Queen of Air and Darkness sometime soon because I've been putting it off and I need to start reading it. And also I'm really excited to reread maybe like A Darker Shade of Magic. Yeah, I think it's due time for me to reread something, so I'm really looking forward to that. And so I think that is everything. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you later. Goodbye!